The restaurant was buzzing with noise, the clatter of plates, and the chatter of people blending into a steady rhythm that the young waitress had grown used to over the years. She moved through the tables with practiced ease, balancing trays with cups of coffee, plates of food, and glasses of water. Her smile was always polite, her nods always kind, even when the customers were rude or impatient. Most of them didn't notice her beyond her uniform and her service. They never imagined there was more to her than the apron she wore and the trays she carried. She had worked in this restaurant for a long time, long enough to know every regular, every favorite dish, and the complaints that seemed to repeat daily. She knew how to anticipate the orders before they were spoken, how to calm the grumpiest customers, and how to make the manager's life easier without anyone noticing. To everyone around her, she seemed ordinary, just another waitress trying to make a living. But inside, she carried a secret that few people knew. Late at night, after the restaurant had closed and the last of the dishes had been washed and stacked, would unlock a different part of herself. In the small apartment she shared with her cat, she would sit at her old upright piano, worn but perfectly tuned, and let her fingers dance across the keys. The music that came out was not ordinary. It was beautiful, precise, and full of feeling. She had trained for years, taking lessons since she was a child. She had dreamed of being a professional pianist, performing in big halls and touching people with music. But life had other plans. Money was tight, opportunities were rare, and she had to survive. So for now, she played in secret, her passion hidden from the world that only saw her serving meals. On this particular morning, the restaurant was especially busy. A new group of customers had arrived, talking loudly and laughing without regard for the people around them. One of them, a man with an expensive suit and a watch that gleamed under the light, kept checking his phone and tapping his fingers impatiently. He didn't glance at her as she brought over his coffee, not once making eye contact. She forced a polite smile and set the cup in front of him. "Is this table clean?" one of the guests asked, pointing to the crumbs left by the previous diners. "Yes, sir. I've just cleared it," she replied calmly, wiping the surface again for good measure. He huffed and waved her away, clearly expecting her to rush. Around them, other customers were chatting, eating, or scrolling on their phones, oblivious to the small drama unfolding at that table. She moved on to the next, taking orders, refilling drinks, and making sure everyone felt attended to. Her energy was steady, her focus sharp. Even though she felt a small pang of frustration every time someone underestimated her. Back in the kitchen, she helped the chef plate the orders, arranging the food carefully before passing it out. The kitchen was hot, filled with the smell of cooking and the sound of pots clanging. Her hands moved quickly, but her mind wandered for a moment to the piano at home. She imagined the touch of the keys under her fingers, the way the notes would fill the room, and the sense of freedom she felt when she played. It was a secret pleasure, something that gave her strength on days like this. When the world seemed determined to see her as nothing more than a waitress, a young coworker approached, glancing nervously at the new guests. "Do you think they'll tip well?" he whispered. She shrugged. "Some do, some don't. Don't let it bother you," he nodded, looking uncertain, and she returned to her work. There was no time for discouragement, not when there were orders to take and plates to deliver. She moved through the tables with grace, anticipating needs before they were spoken, offering a warm smile where it was needed, and keeping a calm presence even when the customers were demanding. Despite the chaos, she found small moments of satisfaction. A child would smile at her antics when she delivered a dessert with a flourish. A regular would nod in recognition, thanking her for remembering their favorite drink. These small connections reminded her that even in this job, she could touch lives in subtle ways, but she knew it wasn't enough. She wanted more. She wanted to be seen not just as a waitress, but as someone with talent, someone capable of creating something beautiful. Her break came mid-morning, a short 15 minutes that she spent in the back, sipping water and catching her breath. She leaned against the wall, listening to the muffled sounds of the restaurant. Her mind wandered to the piano once again. She imagined herself playing in a hall filled with people, the lights dimmed, the audience silent in anticipation. The music would flow from her hands, each note carrying emotion, each chord telling a story. She closed her eyes for a moment, savoring the feeling, before opening them and returning to her reality. Customers continued to come and go, and the day pressed on. She noticed the man in the suit again, now talking on his phone, clearly frustrated. He barely acknowledged her presence, treating her like an invisible part of the restaurant. Other coworkers rolled their eyes, muttering under their breath about his attitude. She ignored it all, focusing on her work, keeping her composure, and doing her job with care and attention. Lunch rush turned into early afternoon, and the pace never slowed. Plates were cleared, new orders taken, drinks refilled, and complaints soothed. She moved like a thread weaving through the fabric of the restaurant, unnoticed but essential. Her manager gave her a nod of approval as he passed by, signaling that she was handling everything well. She smiled politely in return, appreciating the acknowledgement. Even if it was small, as the afternoon wore on, she caught sight of a grand piano sitting in the corner of the restaurant, used occasionally for events. She had seen it before, and her heart had skipped a beat every time. She imagined herself sitting there, playing for the guests, letting the music speak when words could not. It was a tempting thought, but she pushed it aside. No one expected her to play, and she had learned over the years that surprises in her life often came with risk. The bell above the door rang, and a new group entered, laughing and chatting loudly. Among them was a woman who seemed to have a sharp eye, noticing details that others overlooked. She glanced around the restaurant, taking in the tables, the staff, and finally, the young waitress who was moving from table to table with her usual grace. There was a moment, just a flicker, when the woman's gaze lingered on her. It was nothing obvious, just a small recognition, a hint that maybe she saw more than she let on. The young waitress didn't notice the look. She was too busy refilling a water glass, smiling politely, and taking the next order. It was another ordinary day in the restaurant, another day where she was underestimated, another day where her talent remained hidden. But something in the air felt different, a sense of possibility she couldn't quite name. She shrugged it off, focusing on the next task, the next customer, the next plate to deliver. As the day came to a close and the evening shift began, the restaurant started to quiet down. The customers who remained were fewer, their voices softer. She moved through the tables with a sense of calm, knowing that soon she would be free to go home, to unlock the piano in her small apartment, and to play the music that had been waiting inside her all these years. The thought brought a small smile to her face, a quiet hope that perhaps one day, someone would see her for who she truly was. For now, she kept moving, serving, smiling, and enduring. She was underestimated, overlooked, and treated like she was ordinary. But deep inside, she carried a spark, a talent, and a dream that refused to be silenced. And one day she knew that spark would ignite, and the world would have to pay attention. Until then, she would continue to be the waitress everyone thought they knew, quietly carrying the music in her heart, waiting for the moment she could share it with the world. The afternoon had passed with its usual mix of rush and quiet moments. But suddenly, the rhythm of the restaurant shifted. The regular pianist who played during dinner had called in sick at the last minute. The manager's face twisted in panic as he paced back and forth behind the counter, trying to figure out a solution. The staff looked at each other uneasily, knowing how much the guests loved the live music. Without it, the atmosphere would feel empty and quiet. Complaints were inevitable. The young waitress carried plates to tables, sensing the tension in the air. She had seen this kind of chaos before, but today it felt different. The manager's worry was visible, his eyes darting toward the empty corner where the piano stood silently. Some of the more outspoken customers were already grumbling about the lack of music, their voices carrying just enough for the staff to hear. "Who can play?" one of the waiters asked nervously, glancing at the staff who might know a tune or two. The manager sighed. "I don't know. Maybe someone here can try. Just, please, don't mess it up. The dinner crowd is coming in soon." A few of the staff shook their heads or laughed nervously. Playing piano was not something most of them knew how to do, and they certainly did not expect a waitress to step up. The young waitress felt a familiar tug in her chest. Her fingers itched to touch the keys, to let the music flow and fill the room. But she hesitated, aware of the skepticism she would face if she offered. "I can try," she said quietly, almost hoping no one would hear. The manager turned, eyes narrowing. You've never played here before?" "I know," she replied calmly, "but I can play. Just let me try." Her co-workers exchanged skeptical glances, some smirking, others whispering under their breath. The man in the expensive suit, who had arrived earlier, looked up from his phone and gave a dismissive glance. Clearly unconvinced that a waitress could do anything beyond serving drinks and food. "Go ahead," the manager said reluctantly, gesturing toward the piano. "But if it doesn't work, we'll have to figure something else fast." She walked over to the piano, her heart pounding. The keys looked familiar, almost calling to her. She took a deep breath, steadying herself as she lifted her hands to the keyboard. The room seemed to hold its breath too, the buzz of conversation fading as if the world was waiting for the first note. She pressed her fingers down gently, and a soft melody began. It started slowly, delicate but with intention. The sound was clear and precise, each note forming a bridge between her heart and the room around her. At first, the customers didn't react, unsure of what to expect, but slowly, the music began to capture their attention. Pulling them away from their conversations and devices, the melody grew stronger, richer, each chord resonating through the restaurant. People stopped what they were doing, turning toward the piano with wide eyes. The skeptical man in the suit furrowed his brow, then leaned back, clearly surprised by the beauty that was unfolding. The other staff watched in awe, their mouths slightly open, realizing that the quiet waitress they had overlooked was producing music that filled the entire space. She lost herself in the rhythm, letting the notes guide her. The world outside the restaurant disappeared. The clattering plates, the talking customers, even the manager's anxious glances faded into nothingness. For a moment, it was just her and the music, and she let it tell the story she had carried inside her for years. Each note spoke of dreams, of hope, of the frustration of being underestimated, and of the joy that came from finally expressing herself. The crowd grew quiet, mesmerized by the unexpected performance. Children who had been playing with their food paused to listen, their eyes wide with wonder. Couples who had been talking softly now leaned closer, captivated by the emotion in the music. Even the grumpy regulars who had come in complaining stopped mid-bite, acknowledging silently that something extraordinary was happening before them. Her hands moved fluidly, never missing a beat. She shifted seamlessly between soft, delicate phrases and powerful, commanding chords, demonstrating a skill that could only come from years of training and passion. Every note she played carried a piece of her story, a story no one had expected to find in a waitress who appeared so ordinary. She was no longer invisible. She was commanding attention, drawing every eye toward her, as if the piano itself had chosen her to speak through it. As the first piece came to a gentle close, the room erupted in applause. Some customers whistled, some clapped enthusiastically, and a few even stood to cheer. The young waitress smiled, feeling a rush of relief and pride. The manager's face had changed from panic to astonishment, and the co-workers who had doubted her now looked at her with newfound respect. Even the man in the expensive suit nodded slowly, acknowledging the surprise and the talent before him. "Wow," one of the staff whispered. "I didn't know she could do that." She shook her head with a quiet smile, trying to keep the focus on the music rather than the attention she was suddenly receiving. I like to play," she said softly, almost to herself. The dinner crowd started to arrive, but the atmosphere was transformed. The music had set a tone, creating warmth and anticipation. People were relaxed, smiling, and more engaged with the restaurant around them. The manager hurried to the counter, speaking to her with a mix of gratitude and awe. "You saved the night," he said quietly. "I don't know what we would have done without you." She nodded, still a little breathless from the performance. "I'm happy to help." Throughout the evening, she continued to play, shifting between classical pieces, soft jazz, and even popular tunes that she knew the crowd would recognize. Each piece was met with increasing admiration. People who had previously overlooked her were now watching closely, waiting for her next note. She felt a sense of fulfillment she had not experienced in years, knowing that her music could touch others so profoundly. As the night went on, the restaurant seemed to shine in a new light. The young waitress moved between the tables with her usual efficiency. But now there was a difference in how people looked at her. The smiles were warmer, the nods more sincere, and the tips more generous. The invisible barrier that had separated her from recognition had begun to crumble, and she could feel it. After the dinner rush, she took a moment to sit at the piano alone. The restaurant was quiet, the customers gone, the dishes cleared. She let her fingers drift across the keys, improvising, exploring melodies that had been waiting inside her. The music felt like a conversation, a dialogue between her heart and the empty room. She smiled to herself, realizing that something had changed. She had been underestimated for so long, but tonight she had shown that her talent could not be ignored. The manager approached again, standing quietly at the edge of the room. "You were incredible," he said, his voice filled with genuine admiration. "I didn't know anyone here could play like that. I might have underestimated you." She laughed softly, a light, warm sound. "I think people underestimate a lot of things," she replied. "I just hope they noticed the music, not me." But the truth was, people had noticed her. The way she had played, the emotion in her hands, the skill that had been hidden behind years of routine work had all been impossible to ignore. For the first time in a long while, she felt seen, not just as a waitress, but as someone capable of creating something truly remarkable. As she packed up her things for the night, she felt a sense of possibility growing inside her. The music had opened a door she hadn't dared to knock on before. She had faced skepticism, doubt, and the weight of being underestimated, and she had emerged with her talent shining through. She walked out into the cool night air, the sounds of the city around her. But inside, the music continued to play, a reminder that her dreams were alive, and that perhaps the world was finally ready to hear her story. The evening had settled into a calm rhythm after the initial chaos of the piano performance. The restaurant, once buzzing with the stress of the missing pianist, now hummed softly with an almost magical energy. Guests lingered longer at their tables, sipping drinks and savoring the last bites of their meals. The young waitress moved among them, not just serving plates, but carrying a quiet confidence that had begun to take root in her. She noticed subtle changes in the way people looked at her. The skeptical man in the suit, who had earlier questioned her abilities, now kept glancing in her direction with an expression that was difficult to read. He had heard every note she played, watched as she transformed the ordinary evening into something memorable, and something about that impressed him. He didn't speak, but the nod he gave her when their eyes met was enough to tell her he had seen more than he let on. Her coworkers, who had doubted her just hours before, were now whispering among themselves, amazed at her skill. Some asked if she had ever performed professionally. Others wondered why she had never played publicly before. She responded with modest smiles, not wanting to boast, letting the music speak for her instead. But inside, a sense of satisfaction bloomed. She had shown them that appearances were often deceiving, that talent could hide in the most unexpected places. The piano, once an unnoticed fixture in the corner, had become the heart of the room. Its sound filled the space, weaving through conversations and laughter, adding warmth to every corner. Children stopped playing with their toys to listen, enchanted by the melody. Couples leaned toward one another, sharing quiet smiles, their eyes reflecting the beauty of the music. Even the staff, who were busy cleaning or taking orders, paused to listen, caught up in the spell that the young waitress had cast. As she played, she let her emotions flow freely. Each piece told a story, some happy, some melancholic, some reflective. She moved effortlessly from soft, delicate notes that seemed to float in the air to powerful chords that resonated through the floor and walls. The music had a life of its own, and she felt as though she and the piano were speaking the same language. Sharing a conversation only they could understand, the guests began to react more openly. Some whispered to one another about the unexpected talent they were witnessing. Others pulled out their phones, capturing snippets of her performance, recording memories they would later share. There was laughter, sighs of appreciation, and even tears quietly wiped away at a few tables. It was a performance that reached people in different ways, touching them in ways that words never could. Her manager, watching from the counter, felt a mix of relief and pride. He had doubted that anyone in the restaurant could fill the pianist's shoes, let alone a waitress. But here she was, commanding attention not with words or authority, but with the sheer beauty of her music. It was clear that she had a gift, one that could not be ignored, and for the first time, he saw her in a new light. As the night progressed, more people noticed her. Some came from other tables, drawn by the sound of the piano, asking who was playing. They complimented her, offered kind words, and expressed amazement that someone working as a waitress could produce such extraordinary music. She accepted the praise with grace, always redirecting attention to the music itself. But she felt a warmth that went deeper than simple acknowledgement. For the first time, she felt seen in a way that was authentic and meaningful. The young waitress continued to play, improvising pieces that had been tucked away in her mind for years. Each melody was a reflection of her journey, the struggles, the quiet moments of practice, the dreams deferred, and the hope that never faded. The music was personal, yet it connected with everyone in the room. She realized that talent was not just about skill, but about honesty, about allowing oneself to be vulnerable and open in a way that could resonate with others. At one point, a woman at the back of the restaurant, an elderly guest with a gentle smile, began to hum along softly to the tune. Others joined quietly, creating a chorus that blended with the piano. The room felt alive with shared experience, and the young waitress felt a sense of joy she had not known before. Her music had become more than notes on a page. It had become a bridge between people, a way to connect without speaking. She noticed a small group of young musicians in the corner, visiting the restaurant. They had been talking and laughing, but now they sat silently, captivated by her performance. When she finished a particularly intricate piece, they clapped enthusiastically and whispered among themselves. One of them approached later, asking if she gave lessons or performed elsewhere. She shook her head with a soft smile, keeping her world grounded in the restaurant for now. But the questions planted a seed of possibility in her mind. The man in the expensive suit, who had been quietly observing for most of the evening, finally approached her when there was a brief pause. He spoke in a tone that was both respectful and curious. "That was impressive. I had no idea. Have you considered performing outside of this place?" She looked at him, feeling a mix of humility and excitement. "I've played before, but not publicly for a long time. I wasn't sure anyone would take it seriously." He nodded, as if understanding something deeper. "Talent like that shouldn't be hidden. You have a gift, and people should hear it." His words stayed with her long after he returned to his table. It was the first time someone had suggested that her music could reach beyond the small restaurant, that it could touch a wider audience. The thought was both thrilling and terrifying, but she felt a spark of courage she hadn't felt before. Maybe it was time to believe in herself in the same way she believed in the music she played, as the evening drew to a close. The young waitress cleaned up with a quiet sense of satisfaction. The restaurant felt different now, as if the night had been transformed by something intangible but undeniable. The music had left a mark, a memory that lingered in the minds of everyone who had heard it. She walked among the empty tables, running her fingers along the edges, imagining how different this place could feel if music was always part of it. She thought about the future, the doors that might open, and the new opportunities that could arise from a single decision to play, despite the doubts of others. Before leaving, she returned once more to the piano, sitting down and letting her fingers hover above the keys. She played a soft, lingering melody, one that spoke of hope, dreams, the quiet strength that had carried her through so many underestimated moments. The notes floated into the empty room, echoing softly. As if the piano itself was acknowledging her presence and her journey, she closed the lid gently, feeling a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. The night had been more than she could have imagined. She had faced doubt, skepticism, and the weight of being underestimated, and had emerged with something profound. She realized that talent alone was not enough. Courage, persistence, and the willingness to seize a moment were equally important. The music had shown her, and everyone who listened, that hidden potential could shine brilliantly when given the chance. Stepping out into the cool night air, she felt the city around her, alive with possibilities. The quiet confidence that had grown during her performance stayed with her, and she understood that this was only the beginning. The restaurant, the guests, the applause, they were all part of a story that was unfolding, one note at a time. And she knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her heart, that her music had the power to change not just her own life, but the lives of those who were willing to listen. The days after the piano performance were unlike any the young waitress had ever experienced. She walked into the restaurant each morning to a new energy in the air. Customers who had been there the night of her first performance approached her with smiles and questions. Some asked if she would play again that evening, while others simply complimented her skill and expressed how much the music had touched them. Even the regulars, who had once dismissed her as just another server, now greeted her warmly and with curiosity in their eyes. Word had spread quickly. Guests had shared videos and photos from the night of her performance on social media. Comments ranged from awe to amazement, and the restaurant's reputation began to grow. People came not just for the food, but to see the waitress who played piano like a professional. Her name became known among locals and even visitors from other parts of the city who wanted to experience the unique combination of good food and exceptional music. The manager, who had been nervous about her stepping up initially, now looked at her with genuine admiration. "You've brought something special here," he said one morning as she took orders at the counter. "The place feels alive in a way it never did before. You've changed everything." She smiled quietly, feeling a mixture of pride and humility. "I'm just happy I could play," she replied. But inside, she felt the thrill of being appreciated for something that truly mattered to her. Her coworkers had also changed in their demeanor. The ones who had once whispered doubts now asked for tips, techniques, and even lessons on piano basics. A few of them seemed inspired by her dedication and talent. Now, realizing that someone's position or appearance did not define what they could achieve, she answered their questions politely, encouragingly, but always keeping the focus on the music rather than herself. One evening, a local music teacher who had heard about her performance came to the restaurant with a notebook in hand. He watched quietly from a corner as she played, listening to the complexity and emotion in her fingers. When she finished, he approached her table with a respectful bow. "Your talent is remarkable," he said. "Have you ever thought about performing professionally? You could inspire many people with your music." She looked down, feeling a mix of excitement and doubt. I've thought about it, but life hasn't really allowed me the chance," she admitted. "I've always played in private, and I never imagined anyone would notice." He smiled warmly. "It's never too late. Talent like yours deserves to be shared. You could start small, perform in local venues, or even give lessons. People want to hear your music." The idea lingered in her mind long after he left. Could she really take the step from being a waitress with a hidden talent to someone who performed publicly, even professionally? The thought was both thrilling and intimidating. But for the first time, the possibility didn't feel impossible. Meanwhile, the restaurant itself began to change. With her music drawing crowds, business grew. Reservations filled up faster, and the staff worked with a new sense of energy and purpose. The piano performances became a regular feature, with her playing in the evenings as guests enjoyed their meals. It became more than just music. It was an experience, and people were willing to travel for it. She noticed small but meaningful shifts in the way people treated her. The man in the expensive suit who had doubted her abilities returned several times, each time offering a polite nod, a kind word, or even a compliment on her music. Others who had once overlooked her seemed to approach her with newfound respect. The invisible barrier that had kept her underestimated for years was breaking down, and she felt the warmth of recognition in a way she had never known. The young waitress also began to feel a growing sense of responsibility. People were looking to her not just for music, but for inspiration. She realized that her performances had the power to lift spirits, change moods, and create memorable experiences. This awareness encouraged her to practice even more diligently. to explore new pieces, and to experiment with her own compositions. She wanted every note to carry meaning, to connect with those who listened, and to make every performance unforgettable. One evening, after a particularly moving performance, a small group of musicians approached her. They were local performers, curious and eager to collaborate. "You have incredible talent," one of them said. "We've been looking for someone who can bring emotion and skill to our ensemble. Would you consider joining us for a performance?" Her heart raced with the possibility. She had never imagined an opportunity like this, not in her wildest dreams. "I'd like that," she said softly, her voice filled with a mixture of excitement and disbelief. As the weeks went by, invitations began to arrive. Some were for small local events, others for private gatherings. Each offer was carefully considered, and she realized that her life was slowly expanding beyond the confines of the restaurant. It was not just a job anymore. It was a platform, a bridge to something bigger and more meaningful. She began to understand that her music had value, that it could reach beyond the walls of the restaurant, and that people genuinely wanted to hear what she had to offer. Despite all this attention, she remained grounded. She continued to serve at the restaurant, keeping the routines that had once defined her life. But now, each interaction carried a new dimension. She felt seen, appreciated, and respected in ways that were tangible and empowering. The young waitress who had once been underestimated was becoming someone others admired, someone whose talent could not be ignored. One evening, as she packed up after closing, she reflected on how much had changed in such a short time. The quiet moments she had once spent practicing in her small apartment had grown into something larger, something that touched many lives. The music she had carried in secret had become a force that drew people together, inspired awe, and created opportunities she had never thought possible. Her manager approached with a thoughtful look. "I've been thinking," he said, "you've done so much for this place, and people are noticing. If you want, we can find a way for you to play more often, maybe even headline some nights. You deserve it." She smiled, a quiet warmth in her chest. "I'd like that," she said. "I want to keep sharing the music." Excitement and possibilities were growing, and she felt ready to embrace them. She knew that recognition was not just about applause or attention, but about having the courage to step forward and let her true self be seen. Each performance, each note played, was a declaration that she was more than what people had assumed, that her talent was real, and that she had the power to change her own life. As she walked home that night, the city lights reflecting on the pavement, she felt a sense of anticipation for the future. Her life was shifting in ways she had never imagined, and every step she took carried the promise of new experiences, new connections, and new opportunities. The young waitress who had once been underestimated was now recognized not only for her skill but for her courage, determination, and the quiet brilliance that had always lived within her. And as she turned the key to her apartment, ready to sit at her own piano and continue her practice, she felt a deep sense of peace and excitement. The journey was far from over, but she had crossed a threshold. She had been seen. She had been heard. And for the first time, she truly believed that her music could take her anywhere she dared to go. The young waitress walked into the restaurant one evening with a quiet confidence that had been growing over the past weeks. The familiar hum of conversation and clinking plates felt different now. It was no longer just the background of a routine job. It was the stage for something she had been preparing for all her life, whether she realized it or not. Tonight, she would play not only for the guests but also for herself. Fully aware of the journey she had been on as she approached the piano in the corner, she took a deep breath and let her fingers hover above the keys. The restaurant was busier than usual, filled with curious guests who had heard about her talent from friends, family, or social media. Some were regulars, eager for their nightly dose of her music, while others were new, drawn by the promise of witnessing something extraordinary. The anticipation in the air was palpable, and she felt it as a mix of excitement and calm, a feeling she had learned to embrace. The first notes floated into the room, soft and delicate, yet filled with emotion. She let the music guide her, her fingers moving effortlessly, expressing every feeling she had stored over the years, the long shifts, the moments of doubt, the hidden dreams, and the courage it had taken to step forward. Each chord seemed to carry a message, not just to the audience but to herself. She had arrived at a place where her talent could no longer be ignored. The guests reacted almost immediately. Conversations slowed, laughter softened, and all eyes turned to the piano. Some guests leaned forward in their chairs, captivated, while others closed their eyes, allowing the music to wash over them. Children paused their playful chatter, mesmerized by the sounds. Even the staff, busy with their duties, took moments to glance at her in awe. Realizing that they were witnessing something special, something rare, she transitioned seamlessly between pieces, each one telling a different story. Some were joyful, with a lively rhythm that made people smile and tap their feet. Others were contemplative, filled with subtle emotion that stirred memories and feelings deep within. Her performance was not just technical. It was a conversation between her heart and the hearts of everyone in the room. She played with honesty, vulnerability, and a depth that left no doubt about the years of dedication and practice behind her talent as she played. A few guests began recording videos, sharing them quietly with friends and online. Her music was spreading not just through the restaurant but beyond, reaching people who might never have imagined a waitress could perform with such skill. She noticed the man in the expensive suit who had once doubted her, watching intently with a smile that showed genuine respect and admiration. His nod was subtle, but it meant more than words could convey. The applause that followed each piece was warm and heartfelt. Some people stood, clapping enthusiastically, while others whistled softly in appreciation. She smiled, feeling a mix of gratitude and fulfillment. The recognition was not just for her technical skill, but for the courage it had taken to reveal her talent, to step beyond the assumptions of others, and to allow herself to be seen in her true form. After one particularly intricate and emotional piece, a quiet hush fell over the room. The music lingered, wrapping around the tables and the walls, leaving a sense of wonder in its wake. The young waitress felt a profound connection with everyone present, understanding that the music had created a bridge between her world and theirs. She realized that this was more than a performance. It was a celebration of resilience, talent, and the quiet strength that had carried her to this moment. Following the performance, a local event organizer approached her. "Your music is incredible," he said with enthusiasm. "I organize concerts and small gatherings, and I think you could inspire many people. Would you consider performing at one of our events?" She felt a rush of excitement and nervousness. The opportunity was exactly what she had dreamed of, yet it was also a leap into the unknown. I'd like to," she replied softly, a smile spreading across her face. "I'd be honored." Word continued to spread, and soon, invitations arrived from various venues, both local and beyond. People wanted to hear her play, to witness her talent firsthand. Each offer was a validation of the years she had spent practicing in secret, of the passion she had nurtured quietly while working as a waitress. The possibilities felt endless. She embraced them with a growing sense of courage and determination. Despite the newfound attention, she remained grounded. She continued to serve at the restaurant, balancing her duties with her performances. She understood that her journey had started here, among the clatter of dishes and the routine of daily work, and she honored that foundation. But now, each interaction, each performance, carried a deeper meaning. She was no longer just serving meals. She was sharing a part of herself, connecting with people in a way that words could never fully capture. Her life outside the restaurant began to change as well. She received invitations to collaborate with other musicians, to participate in small concerts, and even to teach piano to eager students. Each opportunity was a step toward a life she had once only imagined. She approached these experiences with humility and focus, understanding that talent alone was not enough. Dedication, preparation, and authenticity were essential. One evening, after a particularly moving performance, she found herself reflecting on her journey. She thought about the long hours spent working as a waitress, the skepticism and doubt she had faced, and the quiet determination that had never wavered. She realized that every challenge, every underestimated moment, had shaped her into the musician she had become. Her experiences had given her depth perspective and an understanding of people that enriched her music in ways could never have predicted. The applause that followed her final piece of the evening was thunderous. Guests rose to their feet, cheering and clapping, some even shouting words of encouragement and admiration. She bowed humbly, feeling a mix of pride and gratitude. The journey from being underestimated to being recognized had been long, filled with doubt and perseverance. But it had led her to a place of fulfillment she had never dared to hope for. Later, as she packed up her things and prepared to leave, she paused to look around the restaurant. The space felt transformed, not just by her music, but by the connections it had created, the joy it had brought, and the lives it had touched. She realized that her talent was not just a gift for herself, but a gift for others, a way to inspire, comfort, and uplift. Walking home through the quiet streets, she felt a sense of peace and anticipation. Her life had expanded beyond the boundaries she had once known, and the possibilities were now real, tangible, and exciting. She understood that recognition was more than applause. It was the acknowledgement of her courage, her persistence, and her willingness to share her true self with the world. Sitting at her piano in her small apartment, she played a final melody, soft and lingering, a reflection of her journey. The music was full of gratitude, hope, and the quiet triumph of someone who had been underestimated, yet never lost faith in herself. Each note was a celebration of resilience, of dreams pursued, and of the transformative power of talent and dedication. As the last notes faded, she closed the lid gently and smiled. She had proven to herself and to the world that being underestimated did not define her. Her music, her passion, and her courage had opened doors, touched hearts, created opportunities she had never imagined. The young waitress who had once been overlooked had become a musician recognized not only for her skill, but for the spirit, authenticity, and determination that had carried her every step of the way. Her story was one of quiet triumph, of hidden potential revealed, and of the belief that talent, when nurtured and shared, could change a life. She had stepped into the light, and for the first time, the world could see her as she truly was, a gifted musician, a resilient woman, and someone whose music could inspire anyone willing to listen.